Line Sports Betting Podcast. Apologies for the tardiness if there was any of you who were waiting for the 8:30 mark for us to start. We had some technical difficulties, but we are back and better than ever. Um, on my end, this particular episode, you'll notice I have a different location just about every week. This is my sister's bedroom. I'm with my family for the holidays. Um, some of you might be asking, Cam, why aren't you in your bedroom? I don't have a good answer. My sister got down here in Georgia first, so she claimed my bedroom, the one that I occupied for no less than 20 years. So I have been relegated to what we call the guest bedroom slash storage unit. I feel like I'm like Harry Potter right now. Um, but yeah, it's no big deal. Just a little adversity. Today, we are probably going to be a little bit more brief than we normally are. Not a ton of material compared to some other weeks. We're going to go over our recaps of the first round. I guess they were college football playoff games. I guess they were playoff
Their
games. We're
games.
going to go over. They were two teams played. So we'll recap the JV and varsity scrimmages that took place Friday and Saturday, do a small preview about our leans based off initial lines for the second round matchups, and a little bit special today. We're going to go 5 plays for some of the upcoming bowl games, the ones that I think you guys would care about the most and the ones that we care about the most. So we're going to have 5 plays for each of those. We'll go over those at the end. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
We're ready.
Let's dive in. Um, we'll just go game at a time here. Start with the Friday game, Notre Dame and Indiana. Notre Dame takes this one. I believe the final score was 27-17.
Yep.
To me, not as close as
Almost
the
to
score
cover.
indicates. Yeah, almost a cover. But not really as close as the score indicated. Um, Initial thoughts on this game in particular. What do you guys got?
Initial thoughts. Indiana had this is cut and paste exactly what people meant by there is the deserving 12 teams and there is the best 12 teams in college football. We
Yeah.
are here at the deserving mark. This game, along with a few other games, is a perfect example of that. Indiana has no place in the big boys. They had a good season. They won the games they scheduled this year. That's great for them, but they are not a top 12 football team in this league. I'm sorry.
That's where I disagree. I think they are a top 12 team. They may be 12, but they're a top 12 team because I think there are 3 teams that should have been in the Alabama, Ole Miss, and um, South
South
Carolina.
Carolina.
But also, would we say we take Indiana over Boise? Would we take them over Arizona State? Arizona State's, I think, close. I'd probably take them over Boise because I think their run defense it was fine. They allowed one big run basically, which is a ton of Notre Dame's yards. Um, but Indiana was a top 12 team, regardless. If you take out the other 3 teams that played and lost, I think they were the best team. They were the best team that played that lost.
I I agree from a defensive standpoint. I think defensively they did the most to slow down the opposition they were facing. Offensively, I don't agree. Um, I just don't think they had an offense that matched up. I just not enough. Not going to win anything at the line. They couldn't really. You get garbage time late, so it's like the 17 is like misleading to me. Like they really to me they scored 10 or 7 really.
Yeah.
But I think defensively, I do kind of agree with you. They limited a lot of explosives. I think there's only one really bad explosive that they gave up, maybe 2. One that really hurt them, but they did a decent job of that, and they kept it somewhat competitive. But at no point in time did I ever feel like this game wasn't in hand. Like Notre Dame had this game in hand from the onset. I didn't ever feel like it was close, even though the score indicates it might have been close.
I felt that way about basically every game, though, honestly.
I felt that way about every game.
But yeah, I think Indiana is deserved and also was a top 12 team in my eyes. Now I could be biased, Big Ten guy here, but I think they were like they were at least 12, if anything. Um,
I don't even
I
think you can
think,
put them at 12 because there's 3 teams that are in the Big Ten that would stomp Indiana. In Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, they would all stomp Indiana. And then you got at least 5 teams that we've talked about in the SEC. That puts you at 8. And then you got, I would think Miami should have been more deserving than Indiana, really, if we want to look at it that way.
Miami
Because,
had no defense. They had
yeah,
no
but
defense
I mean,
they have a
whatsoever.
top 5 offense. Just because they play a
I
different
mean, it
style of
it
game
it
doesn't
basically
mean they're
be a
not
shootout.
good.
It'd be a shootout, and
Which Miami has won plenty of those this year.
yes,
I
but
would
if
I would rather have a shootout than what we got. Like,
yeah,
so
yeah.
what if Miami gives up 45? They're gonna at least score 38. Even if they don't win, like, you're gonna see them do it on the offensive side of the
all
ball.
I'm saying is if Indiana plays Miami at a neutral site, they're both elite offenses, and I'm taking the team with the
All
better
right.
defense.
Elite is a stretch.
And
They
I'm
were
with
elite
Brandon on that
all
one.
Indiana,
year until this
Are you
until this
saying
time.
Indiana's offense is elite? Because I
Yes,
just watched the Notre Dame defense pick them apart play after play after play.
this Notre Dame defense is also top 10 in the country, probably.
In elite, I mean, you're a Florida fan. I would have Florida beating Indiana.
I would not.
I don't think Florida beats Indiana.
I do.
I'm somewhere
Physicality
in between.
standpoint, I watched Notre Dame out physical Indiana the entire game.
That they did
Yeah,
do.
they did
That
that.
that they did do.
But
Which,
do we
if you're
think
going to talk
Miami does
about
that?
top 12
No.
teams, that's just Indiana lost by poor coaching, bad game plan. They got out physical, matched out. I mean, at no point, like, if we take Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Miami, they probably put up a better fight against Notre Dame.
My thing is there's something to be said about beating the teams you're supposed to beat and losing to the teams that you're supposed to lose to. They beat every team they were supposed to beat. Miami was supposed to go 12-0 this year, and they went 10 and
Well,
2.
I mean, if Georgia plays, you know, Emmanuel College, they're gonna beat them. They're supposed to beat them. I mean,
What did Miami do all
Manual.
year? They beat trash teams, but also lost to 2 trash teams.
well, Georgia Tech's not very trash.
Yeah, Georgia Tech took Georgia overtime, 8 overtimes.
And
That's
Syracuse
not a
is
bad loss to me.
Syracuse pretty talented, and they had nothing to lose. That's a clean cut trap game for Miami right there.
I'd argue if Haynes King doesn't get hurt, Georgia Tech has 10 wins.
Yeah,
I mean, if so, we're saying it's not a bad loss. Okay, is Florida a bad loss for Ole Miss? It's the same
not.
exact
I mean,
situation. It's the same exact
it's a bad
situation.
loss because Ole Miss has a lot on the line, but it's not because Florida's
Miami
a
had a lot
horrible
on the
football
line.
team.
Miami had a lot on the line. It's
Right?
the same
But they
exact
didn't play
situation.
terrible football teams.
Wait, huh?
Saying like, Ole Miss has lost to Florida. Ole Miss has a lot on the line, but Florida's a good football team.
But you just said Tech was a good football team.
They are.
I think Syracuse is a fine football team.
I do too.
I mean, we're saying that Ole Miss's loss to Florida is a bad loss because it
I
kept
would
them out of the
equate
playoff.
it I would
I
equate
wouldn't
it
say it's like a
to
bad loss. Like it's not like it's not like a Alabama losing to Oklahoma. That's a bad loss.
to me it's that loss is exactly like Miami's loss to Syracuse. Like, Syracuse is a competitive team, Florida's a competitive team, but those are still matchups that you should win.
Like at the end of the day, there's a lot better football teams than Indiana, and they got exposed. So did a lot of teams in this playoff. I
I
mean,
would say 4. I'd say 4
yeah,
of them.
and I think there's still some more exposing to do, which is another
There will be 2
reason
more.
why, yeah, is why the system is flawed. But I think Indiana, like you said, they won the games that they scheduled. But the problem is their schedule was very, very, very weak.
See, but also there's a thing to be said about that. Like we're saying that Alabama should have got in over Indiana, and I'm not saying Indiana's a better team, but
If
Alabama
you
lost
give
the games they
me
were supposed to win.
if you
Indiana
say,
won the games they were supposed to win.
but at the same time, Alabama's still a better football team. There's no denying that.
There's something to be said though about getting 18 to 22-year-olds to show up every week.
Right.
That's why they should have been in,
But
and they're a top
it's
12 team.
I mean, yeah, it's you could
It's
show up
valid.
every week
That's valid.
week in, week out, but when
And
you
it's
have
not like
that
they
week,
were
when you don't play anybody, it's a lot easier to show up.
it's not like they were coming in winning most games by one possession. Every win but one was by 14 or more.
But who would you say is Indiana's best win this season?
I mean, you got me there. Probably like Nebraska, where they blew them out like 56-7, and Nebraska was a solid football team. But then we can also go to the point where, okay, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Miami had bad losses, and Indiana didn't have that.
I mean, that's fair, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure Nate would agree if he was here. If you take Indiana and give them the same schedule as Alabama, Indiana's maybe a 6-6 team, maybe.
I mean, yeah, we know Nate's gonna say that.
Well, you
Nate
can
has been
give them the
saying it all
same
weekend.
schedule as Ole Miss, South Carolina, even Clemson, probably even Texas, and they would still be a 6-6 football team.
I wouldn't say that. I think if they're in the ACC, if they get Clemson's schedule, Clemson didn't have to play Miami, didn't have to play SMU. They got a fairly they would lose to Georgia. They would lose to Georgia, but they could still run the table.
I
And I
mean,
like
it's tough to say, but I just think if you give me the best 12 football team, Indiana might scratch top 20.
I wouldn't go that far.
I
I think like there's like out of every team that played and lost last Friday and Saturday, if you put Indiana versus Clemson, SMU, and probably not Tennessee, I'd take Tennessee over SM or uh over what's it called, Indiana. But after
Yeah.
that showing, I don't like it's a close game because Indiana looked horrible or Tennessee looked horrible, but I'd take Indiana over Clemson and SMU 100%.
I think it's a close game. I
I
think
mean,
they're
yeah, they're
good
all
games.
close,
I think they're good games.
but SMU has like Indiana can stop the run. And once
But
Penn
like
State stopped the run,
there's also like
Kevin Jennings kind of got exposed.
I'm taking Texas A&M over Indiana. Like you said, I'm taking Tennessee over Indiana, Ole Miss, Alabama, obviously Georgia, potentially Florida,
We're taking
potentially
A and
Georgia Tech,
M.
potentially, I mean, obviously Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. You know, I mean, the list kind of goes on, but it's good for Indiana. I mean, it's good for them for recruiting purposes and the season they have. But they just got a very, very lucky slate at drawing the absolute bottom tier of the Big Ten all year.
I mean, yeah, but so did half the teams in the ACC, and they still lost 2 games.
That's fair.
That's fair, yeah.
So I'm taking Indiana because they showed up every week. They had one loss going into this, and it was to a good
Well, I
football
mean,
team.
we can hand out participation trophies. They show up every week to a lot of teams.
Okay, Alabama didn't show up every week. Should they like why?
Even
why
Yeah, but
even
they
Notre
also have
Dame.
to play
Even
an
Notre Dame didn't
absolute
show up every
gauntlet
week.
every week.
I mean, like there is something like I like you cannot change it in my mind. There's something to be said about showing up every week because we've seen teams like Ole Miss, Alabama, Miami, basically every single school that has 3 losses. Not like South Carolina lost to freaking Arkansas. They're bum ass.
See, so there's something to be said. Arkansas, hell, I mean, Arkansas could compete with Indiana. Let's be honest.
I mean,
There's
Arkansas
something to be
competed with
said
South Carolina.
about going on the road in the SEC is a lot harder than going on the road and playing a Michigan State.
I mean,
Because, I
sure.
mean, look at all the SEC losses. Alabama lost to Tennessee at Tennessee. They lost to Oklahoma at Oklahoma. Ole Miss lost to Florida at Florida. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. That was a home game for Ole Miss. That's a bad loss. But Georgia's two losses come at Alabama and at Ole Miss. I mean, there's something to be said. And same thing with Tennessee. They lost at Georgia. And I think at, was it LSU?
Who?
Maybe.
Ole Miss?
But no, Tennessee.
They lost to Arkansas. I don't know
Yeah.
if I don't know where it was.
So, I mean, there's something to be said about obviously playing on the road in the SEC is the hardest thing to do in college football. That's why there's definitely a gap between, okay, our road schedule looks like this, where we got to go to Alabama, to Tennessee, to Ole Miss, to wherever, as opposed to, okay, we got to go on the road to Michigan State, or we got to go on the road to Purdue. It's like, okay,
I mean,
we
yeah,
can
but you can
show
say
up
the same
pretty
thing about
well.
you got to
Like,
go. You got to go on the road to Ohio State, to Penn State,
yeah, but that for Indiana, they just went to Ohio State. That's it.
and
That's one game, and they
we
got
saw
blown
them
out.
compete more than Tennessee.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, but at the same
Tennessee,
time, it's probably a lot tougher atmosphere when it's playoff football and it's at night and it's 20 degrees at the shoe. So, and I'm not sitting here saying Tennessee is like the best football team in America or should be, but I mean, if you give me Tennessee against Indiana, that's a 14-point spread right there, probably.
Notre Dame wasn't a 14-point spread. Tennessee would not be a
Oh, it
14-point spread.
should have been.
I think it'd be a touchdown.
They
I think
won
it'd be
by
a touchdown.
10, not 14.
I promise you, if the line makers could have gone back, they'd have made it like 12 and a half.
I mean, yeah, but they would have made every game 15.
Because realistically,
Yeah, it would have been at least 2 touchdowns.
you could have taken Notre Dame minus 20, and it would have been a pretty good bet if it weren't for the crap that happened at the end.
I mean, yeah, but they're the only team that actually, them and Clemson were the only teams that actually kind of fought back at the end. Tennessee
Yeah,
just
I mean,
rolled over.
There's not much to say about fighting back at the end when, for 55 minutes of
Yeah,
football, you're getting absolutely dominated.
it's called garbage time for a reason.
Yeah. Everybody's checked out.
I mean,
go ahead. One more
They're,
thing, and then let's slide over to SMU.
their defense was the only one to keep their team under 30. I feel like it's pretty solid.
I mean, nobody's claiming Notre Dame to have the best offense, but you could see Indiana couldn't do anything on the offensive side of the ball.
Agreed.
No one could.
Yeah, there was multiple teams that couldn't do anything on either side. So the fact that Indiana was at least able to have half the game with, under a decent amount of control says more than some of these other teams, like the one we're going to talk about next, SMU and Penn State.
That was bad.
So Kevin Jennings was in his nightmare. That was like a nightmare scenario for that poor man. This is an instance where I think the scheduling absolutely exposed a team. I think I talked about it last week, like Rhett Lashley talking about how SMU is not going to be impacted by the cold and all that. They didn't want to be. They were impacted by the cold immediately. You could tell they were impacted by the fans. They couldn't even get plays off when they got into the red zone. Now, what I will say is SMU was actually able to drive the ball very effectively the entire game. They drove the ball well. They were in the red zone 4 separate occasions and came away with no points, whether it be from a pick from Jennings or a turnover on downs. So they actually got yards, but you get into that red zone with all those people yelling at you. They couldn't get plays off, false starts, delay of games. Like you could tell, it's just they had not dealt with adversity like that in any of the other stadiums that they had gone to. And they had traveled well. Like they played really good on the road. They had one road loss against BYU, beat everyone else on the road. So I think, go ahead.
Something to be said about playing on the road in the Big Ten.
I mean, dude, it's cold.
Maybe 3 Big Ten teams.
But which is more than SMU had played. They
I'd
they
I'd
had
say
not faced anything like that.
when they're at their peak, there's a solid 4 or 5. Because I mean, you got Oregon, tough place to play. Ohio State, Penn State, tough place to play. Then you got Michigan when they're good. Arguably one of the hardest places to play in all of, if not the hardest place to play in all of college football.
Even if they're not good, it's still
Yeah.
not easy to play there.
And then you also got USC is a tough place to play
I could throw Michigan State in there.
I mean,
when they're
you
rocking.
could say it's a tough
When
place to
they're
play,
the
but if the
environment's
team,
not fun.
yeah, you could say, I mean, it's a tough place to play, but if the team you're playing there is not
It's not
good,
good. Sure.
then
It's an equalizer. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I don't have a ton else on SMU Penn State. That was the second least competitive game in my eyes, because you could at least see SMU move the ball. Like they were able to get some plays. They were,
At the beginning of
it
the game,
was.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean they got to the point where they could only throw. They weren't going to run. They got
Yeah.
down by too many scores, and it got out of hand.
It really just seemed like the
And
lights were too bright. You know,
absolutely,
like
100%. They had not faced anything like that.
you did have me sold on SMU being a good football team. I do think they've played well all year, but at this level, and I believe Jennings before has gotten benched and stuff for similar outings like this, like a lot of
He
turnovers,
gets he
a lot
gets
of mistakes.
chaotic.
But
He gets
like at his
chaotic.
previous school, where was he at before SMU? Because I believe he
Don't know.
transferred out because he wasn't going to be the starter because of stuff like this, like picks, just not being able to run the offense. And I think, it's easy to move the ball, I would say, for an offense like SMU when they are on their end of the field because, you can just be a little bit safer. But when the field shrinks, when you get into a red zone and then you have elite athletes on defense that can fly around and know what they're doing and they can get pressure on a quarterback like Jennings who really hasn't had to face much of that all year, that's when a lot of mistakes can happen. And I think some of the mistakes were bad. Like clearly, what do you do in moments from a
Oh, he looked
quarterback?
fearful. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he actually looked. You could tell he was intimidated.
I think he'll
Um,
be good for them. Like I think he's the guy for the
it's
next
it's the first time he's faced anything like of that magnitude. You got
right.
to remember, SMU was the AAC last year.
And I
So
think
this is the first time in any type of Power Four.
from
He
a
hasn't faced this.
straight roster standpoint, when you look at teams like SMU compared to these solidified, I guess now Power Four teams, like you're obviously your Penn States, but like the Georgias, the Texas, the Ohio State, those guys, there's a physicality difference with the offensive and defensive line. Like it's their first year being in a big time conference and they've done well with their schedule. But when you get up to the big boys and it's the best 12 teams in the country, or let's say the most deserving, those guys
Yeah,
are just
it's
bigger, faster, stronger, and it's going to cause a lot of havoc for a team that's not prepared for that.
I mean,
yeah,
that's what caused them to lose the Clemson game
Yeah.
because
yep,
there was too many turnovers in the first half from him
yep. They were just able to recover in the second half and make a game out of it.
because
Um,
Clemson's defense is not that great, as we saw.
not as good as Penn State's.
No. Yeah, Penn
Um,
State. They what I had written down is they found another way to win. If you'd have told me Drew Aller would throw for 120, Tyler Warren would have 30 receiving yards, I'd have been like, okay, so SMU kept this as a game.
this is a good game.
But no,
Nope.
they found another way to win
With all that being said, I still find myself not being sold on Penn State totally. Like I know they play Boise, but when it comes down to like when we're in the final four and they have to play a really good football team, I just James Franklin and just the weapons that they have and don't have at some spots, I'm still not completely sold on them. They'd be one team where I'm like, they probably, if we assume they're going to win Boise State game and they make it to the final four, I would assume everybody on the same page, which would be they would have the least likely shot to come out national championship
I'm sold
winners.
on them. I'm sold on their team, their talent, and all that. James Franklin, am I sold on him? No, but that's legitimately. I think Penn State has a top. probably 5 roster in this playoff. It's literally coach that's holding them back.
My I mean, look at any of these top however many teams. Like, how many of them are not flawed? Like
All of them are.
honestly,
All of them are.
everyone's flawed.
I
Like
mean,
like I can look at all of these teams. The ones that won, right? Like let's just like eliminate the ones that are eliminated, right? All these teams that won and eliminate Arizona State and Boise State. So you just have like this top echelon of like 6 teams that we could probably agree on are like probably the 6 best. Out of these 6 teams, who has shown you that they're just above and beyond anyone else? Like who hasn't displayed a moment of weakness? Like who doesn't have a flaw?
I would
Oregon
say
hasn't for the past
there's
12 weeks, but that's it.
In
yeah,
terms of wins and losses, but I still think they look susceptible.
I would say
I
there's
just think
not
they ended up
one
winning.
team with like a clear above and beyond, but I would say between the teams that are left, I could say Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas roster wise are the most complete. They have the most complete.
Most complete is
They have
accurate.
the best. They have the best coaching wise as well,
Agreed.
and the experience and all that. And but we have seen those 4 teams have moments where they lack execution, and I think some of that comes from the teams that they've played that they lost to have been a part of that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, you could say Oregon's weak spot was maybe the Boise State game that they won by a tight margin, or the Ohio State game, which they really could have lost pretty easily. And that's solely just on the execution of the other team matching their fullness of, roster depth and speed,
Yeah.
team speed, physicality, all that. And like same thing with Georgia, Texas. Like watching Texas film, it's like, how can there be any team in the country that competes with this roster? Because they got guys at every position, like the guys. And
Yep.
then they play Georgia, and it's like, okay, well, they got guys at every position too. So it basically comes down to play calling, execution, and game
Execution.
plan and
Yep.
adjustments.
Yeah. Who
That's the same thing.
prepped better? Who executed better?
Yeah, and that's like what we saw in the SMU game. It's just like they weren't prepared. You know what I mean? They weren't prepared for that. They weren't prepared to get blown up at the offensive line and have the
No.
struggle with that. You know what I
I
mean?
don't think any amount of preparation prepares them for that.
They haven't. You have to experience something like that before you can't make an adjustment on something you've never dealt with before.
Right.
Like SMU has never faced that comp at that with the lights
Right.
that bright, and they've never done that.
That's why I
So
think my SEC bias is so heavy. Is because
they've all been there.
there's a influence of that every game in the SEC every week. You know what I mean? Because like,
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
go
There's
back to
bigger magnitude.
Indiana,
Every game is like a bigger magnitude.
right? It's like if we go back to the Indiana argument, there was one game, and it was against Ohio State that they played that could have prepared them for something like this weekend. And obviously, you saw how they handled it. So it's like, it's obviously, I guess you could say, a deserving team, but they're not ready for this level of football, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Indiana and SMU are very similar in terms of good execution in season, lack of preparation for a stage like this. Because
Right.
I
And
just
it's
just the programs as a whole, like you don't see them in this stage a lot.
That's true. And I mean, like, they had what, 2 weeks almost? So
Yeah,
it's just
they
like you
had
can
two
only
weeks.
do so much with your roster at that point, right?
Yeah,
I think the one thing in the Indiana game is Indiana's offense is solely RPOs. And basically what Notre Dame forced them to do was run the ball.
Oh, it's
And
tough because
that's not their thing.
Notre Dame runs a strict man-to-man offense, and running the RPOs against man-to-man just ain't gonna work because
Yeah.
everybody's accounted for. You know what I mean?
exactly. That's like they have a guy already.
Yeah. And
So
then so basically you're
whoever
asking,
your option is, they're covered.
yeah, and basically so at that point you're asking your guys to go beat their guys.
Make plays. You got to go
And
make plays.
when we're talking about Notre Dame's roster compared to Indiana's roster, they ain't gonna win a whole lot. Like, let's
Yeah,
just be honest. They got dudes.
I will
Indiana's
say,
got dudes too, but they ain't like that.
No.
Indiana, their 4 out of their first drives, they got into Notre Dame territory and got into the red zone a decent amount. They just
Again,
only came.
very
They
similar to
only came out
SMU.
of
Very
3.
similar.
They only came out with 3 points. That's their one thing.
Almost the exact same. Like
Yeah,
SMU is
that's
drove
when
the
it,
ball. Like,
that's when it comes down to your guys, man. Like when the field shrinks and it's in, red zone. Obviously, you're not going to win with just man to man. Those guys are gonna because it's you can't. There's no way to get separation that with that little field to play with.
yep. All right, let's do Clemson and Texas, which I feel like was the most competitive out of the games we watched. You could maybe argue for Notre Dame, Indiana, but to me, I think Clemson was able to do the most offensively. Now, could they stop Texas? Absolutely, they couldn't stop them. They couldn't stop a runny nose. But in terms of being able to like fight back a little bit and make it a little bit of a shootout, Clemson was able to do that. To me, it was the most enjoyable game to watch, even though it still wasn't down to the wire. Like
To
none
me,
of these games were down to the wire.
it was 31-7 at one point. That's my thing. And then basically, I think Texas took their foot off. They were like, okay, we got this. And then let them get back in the game. All of a sudden, it's 31-24. And Texas is like, oh, I gotta do something here. Breaks off a 77-yard run next play. That's what I got from it. I mean, Clemson, I think offensively looked the best for sure. Because I mean, first drive they go down, they look good, but also first drive is always scripted. Then the second drive, third drive, that's when you get okay. That's where you actually got to call plays, and that's where they lost. I mean, and Clemson also couldn't stop me running back there.
No,
Yeah, and well, Clemson also couldn't run the football at all, and
no, it
that
was all
just
Klubnik.
it's just
Cade had to
another
do the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I mean,
I thought Cade played good. I don't know about
Cade,
y'all.
I, I
I
wrote,
thought
I literally
Klubnik
wrote it
did it.
down. He played fine.
I thought Klubnik did his thing. Honestly,
definitely gave him a chance. And well, I think everything leading up to this game for Klubnik was a big like motivational tool almost. Like he's
yeah,
from Texas.
yeah.
He's played
He's
against Quinn Ewers
faced he's
before.
faced
Like
Quinn before.
His
so you got to
teammates with
expect
Taff.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to expect
Yeah.
him to go out there and want to win it a lot. But when you have zero run game and obviously you're not going to be able to throw. He did throw for 300 yards, but you're not going to be able to score consistently with him throwing it down the field against Texas. So, like to your point, I think it was, you could say, the most competitive game, which is kind of just really a letdown for the first round of the playoffs because really the game wasn't too competitive. They did fight back a little bit, but they
No.
still lost by
That's
14.
the word. Like the
Yeah.
word is fight. Like
Yeah.
who fought? And I can honestly look at Clemson and say at least they fought. And
And I mean,
I don't
that's
think the
just
other teams fought.
I think that's Dabo and his kind of experience. Like you're not going to have a Clemson team that lays down, I don't think,
Yeah.
but especially in a playoff situation. But
I mean, yeah,
Texas,
but we said earlier that fighting back in garbage time means nothing. Like
Well,
when I was saying Indiana,
they were down by a touchdown in the third quarter, so it's not
yeah,
it wasn't garbage
it
time
was
yet.
still doable.
It was a one-score game in
no,
the third.
it wasn't the third, it was the fourth. I'm
Okay.
fairly
That's
certain
not
on that.
garbage time then. That's
Yeah.
not garbage time.
And we're down
That's
14 and scored 7, then we're down 14 a play later.
Look,
that is a that's
Indiana
fighting.
got their teeth kicked in. That's all I know.
Yeah, I I don't know. The other thing, and I did say this, like the Citadel ran for 300 yards against Clemson. So I
Yeah.
knew if Texas establishes the run and they get a lead, there was no way that Clemson was going to win this game. And since I've already watched a FCS team get 300 yards of rushing against Clemson, I had a feeling Texas was going to be able to run the ball. I almost got the cover though. It was almost 12. So we were almost competing.
Yeah,
Um,
I had like I think in my 5-leg parlay I had -11. That one was scary, even though it was already chalked from then because of freaking Chiefs. I don't even want to get into it.
Now, I will say Texas, the kind of cloud around them has been they haven't played anybody that difficult in their schedule, and they've only lost to Georgia. Like their only two ranked games they've lost. But this Texas team is still like from top to bottom really freaking good.
They're good.
I
So
think
I
they
think the cloud around them being fraudulent is kind of out of the window now. They can play. They can ball. Sark knows what he's doing. The defense is good. And I think yes, the SEC gauntlet is tough. They're lucky to not have had to gone through it that bad. But had they have gone through it, I think they still come out as a winning football team. Like I say winning, but probably a similar 10-2 team, not your 11-1 or whatever they were.
I think I think Texas to me is the most disciplined team out of any team that is left. Like, you just watch them; they don't make a ton of mistakes. Like, I think the offense still lacks explosiveness overall. Like, I'm not going to judge explosiveness on what you do against Clemson and their run defense. Like, I'm not going to judge it off that. I don't think that's a good benchmark for what an explosive offense should be able to do because I've watched a lot of teams do that to Clemson. But in terms of, limiting mistakes, penalties, like, I feel like they are the team that executes the most consistently and is the most disciplined. Them
Yeah.
and Oregon. I think those are the two. I think it's them
I
and Oregon.
I agree. I mean, after I watched the film of the SEC championship game, I think the only way you beat Texas, and it's how Georgia did it twice, is you have to have coordinators and a head coach, obviously, that know the right adjustments to make very quickly, and you have to have veteran players that are on the same page.
That
I
buy
think
in. Yeah.
I think after watching the film on the SEC championship game, Georgia made those changes and adjustments 6 plays into the football game, whereas other teams are probably going to ride that out a lot longer and just
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we've worked on this same game plan for 2 weeks now. We
Yep.
not need to stay with it and execute it, and it'll
Yep.
work." And it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? So you got to change what
Yep.
you're doing. That's the only way I think you can compete with Texas or even like Ohio State, Oregon, similar.
Because Texas prepped. I guarantee it. Texas prepped and they are ready for whatever game they're about to play.
Absolutely.
You want to know who was on the field a lot more?
Who was on the field a lot more?
Arch Manning, baby.
Yeah.
I
Ran a couple
told
options. I
us
think they let him throw a ball too.
he was going to, and then the guy
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
open,
he bounced it out.
and
He bounced it
and so
out.
he just bounced it out. Um, but even then, I think Quinn played a solid game. It was obviously
He
because
looked way better.
the
He looked
run
way
game
better.
was working. I mean, he went 202, had a touchdown. He had an interception that was completely not his fault. It literally bounced off the receiver's hands into a DB's hands.
Yep. It's a good
Um,
throw.
yeah, like he hit him directly in the
Yep.
chest, and
Good throw.
homeboy just missed it. Um, so yeah, like Quinn looked good, and then Arch got involved, just adds an element. So that it's legitimately why I had Texas winning the national championship.
That's why Arch is your MVP. It's dog of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's cover Tennessee and Ohio State real quick, and then we'll kind of sum all of this up before we move on to the second round preview. Tennessee, Ohio State. To me, outside of Nico, I don't think anyone else on Tennessee showed up to this game.
I
No.
had 2 words for it. Holy shit! They look Tennessee had no chance.
No,
Literally, you could
from the
tell from the
beginning.
first drive that Ohio State does, Tennessee was done.
I was over it 6 minutes into the first quarter.
I never, even when it was 21-10 and Tennessee had a tiny bit of momentum going into halftime, I was like, yeah, this game's over.
Yep.
I was like, you had probably the worst half of all time. You were only down 11. That should be a win. But no, I knew that game was over. It was bad.
Another instance where the losing quarterback, kind of like Klubnik, I thought Nico played his butt off. Like
He was running for his life.
he was running. I mean, I don't know how many carries he had. I don't know how many yards he had, but the offense ran solely through him. Well, Sampson got hurt early.
Yeah.
He was done by the second quarter, I think. I don't think he had any carries after the first quarter.
Even then,
So he
he
got back up.
wasn't effective before that.
He wasn't, but you can break him down if you got a
Yeah.
guy. If you got a guy, you can break him down as long as you have it within reach. But they didn't have that as an option. So, I mean, it was really just Nico. I mean, he did everything he could. I still think he has some deficiencies throwing the ball, very inconsistency accuracy-wise. He'll work on that. He's young, so I think he's going to get better. But there's a lot of dog in him. He showed a lot of fight. I think he was the only player that I saw that showed that amount of fight, which is why the score was 42-17 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was that. It was
Tennessee
bad.
wanted. They didn't want any part of that. They didn't want any part of Ohio State on the road. They didn't want that.
If
No,
that Ohio State shows up, they're the best team in the country, straight up.
I
I've
think
seen
this.
them twice though. Play like that. I've seen
That's
them
the yeah.
twice.
That's the one thing.
Yeah.
But like, if that team showed up for what 3 more weeks they would need, they'd win the
Mhm.
national championship.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's you gotta get hot at the right time.
Yeah,
I think that this game really aided in Ohio State looking really good in a sense of I think Tennessee's secondary was filled with 5 freshmen, which is the easiest position on the field to get acquainted to very quickly, I would say, as a freshman. But I mean, when you're going against like now people are calling it wide receiver U, Ohio State, and they just have weapon after weapon after weapon and a very, very experienced quarterback throwing the football. I mean, it's just and 2 really good backs as well. Like, there's nothing they're going to be able to do to stop it. And Tennessee's had a good defense all year. They put up good numbers, but they just matched up very, very poorly against Ohio State. And I don't even think Tennessee's offensive line got off the bus. I mean, I don't know how you don't get hyped up for that game. And
Because it's cold. They didn't want it.
they were
Warm
too
weather
busy.
team.
when
They
you're
were
a
too busy.
lineman, the cold doesn't really affect you because you're going every play. You're not cold probably after three
Like
three
being a
plays.
catcher. It's like being a catcher.
Yeah,
You're
you're
a
good.
catcher. You're like you don't get cold.
Like
Yeah.
They were
maybe if you're like a run blocking wide receiver, then you probably suck. It
Yeah.
probably sucks for you out there. But when you're a lineman, I guarantee you 3 plays in, they don't feel anything.
They were too
Yeah.
busy warming up shirtless, which is the stupidest thing in my mind.
Yeah. They're just trying to show that's that because that's everyone's doubt. That's always my doubt. Like even pro football. It's like if I see the Dolphins and they're going to go play on the road in a cold weather stadium, I'm picking the other team. If I see these southern schools that they've spent the entire season playing in the south in good weather, you haven't experienced that. And then that's all the northern teams do is play in the cold. So if I see them they're going on the road and they're playing in one of these matchups, I'm automatically like leaning towards the other team. Like in my head, I'm like, that's going to be a tough one. Doesn't always happen, but like that's where my mind goes. Now in this one it started with that, and I was like, but Tennessee is they're they've got to be as good, and they're going to get up for this game. You know, like they've got some pieces. They've got a run game that I think Ohio State would struggle with. One of the few that I think Ohio State would struggle with. They didn't, and so I was like leaning towards Tennessee, like actually being able to. And then they just went up to Ohio State and were cold and bad. Cold and bad. um, anything else on this one in particular?
No, it
Yeah.
was just a horrible showing on both ends.
So, just some thoughts to kind of like sum up the first round. My first, I hate that I go to this place, but I'm like in my head I'm like, what was the point? You know why do we have these? Why do we have this round of games? If this is, I would say for 2 of these games, 3, the result could be like predicted beforehand. The one that you probably couldn't predict was Tennessee and Ohio State, and it happened anyways. Um, but like, what was the point? And then teams, if it had been Arizona State instead of SMU, if it had been Boise State instead of Indiana, it'd have been the same thing.
Oh yeah.
It would have been the same exact thing. So like,
Which I
why
mean
why
goes
12? Why now? Why
yeah,
12?
I like the higher number of teams in the playoff just because I guess it's just more football and it's just, cool
You're gonna have to prove it to me
laying
that it's
out.
viable because
Right.
this is
Right.
pointless to me.
I mean, the teams that are in there didn't do a good job of doing that. And, we've had a million arguments every year, everybody about who deserves to be in, who this and that. But there's obviously a clear gap between the actual best 4 teams and
Yeah.
let's say, 10 through 12. And I mean, you can even go as far as the 5 through 10 right now as it stands. But I don't know. I like there's more football. I like the big playoff picture, but I think this year there's a very and there's been a lot of that in the past years, but just a clear gap between actual good competitive football teams and teams that have somehow found their way into this position that they're in.
So the 12 teams not going away, not at least for another year, right?
Right.
What needs to change for next year? What
I
what what
mean,
needs to be different?
what there's what needs to change and what can realistically change are way two different things that
Let's
can happen.
realistically like obviously there's a pipe dream of the 12 best teams get in and they play each other, right? Like that's like the pipe dream that
Right.
probably won't happen because apparently all the conferences were created equal. But like realistically, like what
That's right there. What realistically should change is it should never be the I don't think the 12 most deserving. It should always be the 12 best football teams, regardless of your conference, regardless of if you win your conference or whatever happens. It should be the 12 best football teams because this is what we get. We get a bunch of 14-3, 2-3 score games that just end up being a waste of time to watch and a waste of time to play. And you're risking injury for these really good football teams. And it's like, all the Alabama fans, the Ole Miss fans, South Carolina fans right now that got left out have a really, really valid argument of this is what y'all wanted to see. Indiana
yeah,
get
like
blown out, Clemson to get blown out. Tennessee. I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted the Tennessee Ohio State game would have gone like that
not
because
not to that extent, no.
I think Tennessee is one of the 12 best football teams in the college football world, but I just think we've got to have there's got to be more strength of schedule because that's what Nate told me. All playoff leading up to it is the committee's going to be big on strength of schedule, but the way that they have the setup for it of okay, each conference championship winner is going to get in. Everybody who plays in their conference championship game and loses is going to get in, and we're going to have a group of 5 team in. It's like, what are we doing? Well, nobody wants to watch
Yeah.
this, man. Nobody wants to see Boise State. Nobody wants to see Arizona State. I think Will's probably like the maybe 7% of Americans that want to see Indiana in the playoff.
I didn't
And
think it was totally ridiculous that Indiana was in it. I didn't think it was totally ridiculous that SMU was in it. I think it's totally ridiculous that Boise's in it,
I mean, with
but
with the number being 12, you're going to have teams that don't need to be in there, but they're going to be in there. I mean, you got to fill
yeah,
12 teams, right?
yeah,
But at the same time, like this is towards the realm of it's probably unrealistic, but it's something that probably should happen. Like even if it's a different conference, like for example, let's just say we're in the ACC and North Carolina's really freaking good, Duke's really freaking good, Georgia Tech's really freaking good. SMU's really good. Clemson's really good. Okay, well, sorry, they lost 2 games to other teams that are pretty freaking good, right?
yeah.
If they deserve to be in because they're one of the best 12 teams, put them in because that's what people want to see. And like, you can't sit here and tell me that Notre Dame versus Alabama wouldn't have been a better matchup, or let's say Texas versus
No,
Ole Miss wouldn't have been a better matchup, or
no, for
let's say
sure.
Yeah.
even Penn State versus South Carolina wouldn't have been a better matchup. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
think in the grand scheme of things, if the number's still going to be 12, we've got to go away from one, letting conference championship losers stay in. Because if you lose your conference championship, but your conference championship is a really, really bad conference, like, let's be honest, the ACC is not that strong, right? Like the guys that came out of it were Clemson and SMU, and they got
yeah.
blown out of the water. I
Well,
think the winner should be in because they deserve that.
Clemson screwed all that up because SMU, if they win that game, we don't. You
Yeah,
get one ACC team that's in, and no one's complaining on that end. But yeah, Clemson winning that ACC game, like really, like that
yeah.
made a mess of. Because then someone had to be disappointed. Like I think Bama should have been in. Like that, no doubt about it. Like if I was SMU loses that game, I feel like to me Bama still probably should be playing in that, and SMU shouldn't. but because SMU was a two-loss ACC team, they weren't going to get punished for losing their conference championship game that they didn't have to play in.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they could have just been a regular two-loss team like Miami and then not played in a conference championship and then not be punished for it. So I don't
I,
know. But
I
then, of course,
think
Miami didn't play in it, and I think Miami should have been in the playoff more so than SMU.
right. I think somehow, some way, we've got to figure out how to get these strength of schedules similar somehow. Like SMU should, let's say, for example, SMU has, or even Indiana, have, kind of the bottom end of their conference schedule. Well, their non conference games need to be really good opponents from a different conference. Like
Agreed.
Indiana
I
should have,
100% agree with that.
yeah, Indiana should have to go and play Ole Miss.
Yep.
You know, SMU should have to go and play Ohio State. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
so that way, at the end of the day, you can at least get more of a gauge on how this team stacks up nationally. And we're not just basing these teams off of, okay, well, they beat, let's see, Boston College, Florida State. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
those games shouldn't even matter. Right.
I mean, yeah.
SMU got it like half right because they at least played BYU as a non-conference,
Right.
They
which
were
is
a
that's
solid team.
top 25 team, but they also played Houston Christian. And so
Right.
like what does that do for anyone? Like what they also played Nevada. What does that do for anyone?
Yeah, it just
Like
needs to be settled on the field because I mean, like you said, like this from the chat said, there's no way to measure the 12 best teams unless it's played on the field.
yeah.
Because there's like a scenario that I've been seeing going around where basically like which it sucks it goes away with like conference championships, but it adds more games. So basically, like say the SEC got 4 automatic bids, something like that. 1 and 2 in the conference automatically in. But then
Okay.
3 and 6 and then 4 and 5 play for the
Playing.
last 2 spots.
I like that.
I don't mind that, but the one thing is not every conference can get 4 spots. Which I mean, obviously you'd think it'd be like, okay, SEC gets 4 spots, Big 10 gets 4 spots, something like that. And
Yeah.
then
Four,
maybe
four, two, two.
a spot for ACC, a spot for Big 12, and then like
Yeah, you could do it like that, but say the Big 12, they win the national championship for 2 years straight. Okay, let them have 3 spots. You know what I mean?
Oh, that would
Up
be
the
a good
number of
way to
spots you
reward
get.
it.
But if if say like the SEC
First
gets
round
4 spots, but
eliminations.
all of them
Yeah.
get blown out the first round, okay, we're going to take away a
Yeah.
spot from those guys
see like
until they
my
prove
thing is like
otherwise.
so I got the standings up right here. Imagine if that was this year. This is what the matchups would have been. You can't tell me this wouldn't have been the most fun thing ever. So basically, Texas and UGA locked in,
They're in.
obviously. Then you got Tennessee A&M, 2 defensive teams battle out. Then you got a rematch of South Carolina and Alabama, which, kind of sucks that those 2 teams are playing each other because those might be the 2 best teams in the matchup. But obviously, don't lose to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and you're fine. That's my thing. Like also got this from the chat. Bama would have made it if they didn't get smoked by 21 against Oklahoma. I
Yeah.
mean, like also like we've seen it in the 4-team playoff. There's just been like that can't happen and you get in. And
Yeah.
also let's not act like in the 4-team playoff there wasn't blowouts all the time. We
Right.
Yeah.
saw
The
it with
semifinals was, yeah, it's almost
in the
always at least
national
one. There's always
championship there was
one.
blowouts. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
like I mean
But
like
it's because there's, like you're having a Big 12 championship winner in there, like TCU versus Georgia. That's not a national championship football game. Just because
Yeah.
TCU won their conference championship and then they beat
And they
like a
did good with the schedule that they were given.
yeah.
but they
And then
didn't
you
beat
go to the
Michigan
national
to get there.
championship and it's like 60-3.
They beat Michigan to get there. Like Michigan had their shot to get in, even if they were like people think they were the better team. Michigan had their shot, and they blew it.
Yeah.
Right. To
So I mean,
to
like,
me, it's just like this year, it's a clear example of, obviously the SEC is the best conference all around, right? And that goes to, it's more so like the NFL where any given Saturday, somebody can beat somebody in the SEC. That's not how it is in the Big 12. It's a top heavy Big Ten. ACC, I would say, is similar to that, but it's because there's not like a clear "I'm better than you" team. They're all kind of average. There's some that are a little
ACC
bit
is a
above
bunch of
average.
teams that are the same team.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, the one thing I disagree with that is that any team can beat every team. I mean, it's to a different scale. Like I think bottom tier SEC teams are better than bottom tier Big 12 teams, but we saw it in the Big 12. Colorado, didn't they lose to like Kansas? Something like that.
yeah.
So any team can beat any team in the Big 12, but it's
But
only
Colorado's not
because
that.
their
Colorado like
their
isn't
teams
elite.
are just lower. Like so that's the only statement I disagree with because any team can beat any team in the I think in the ACC and the Big 12. The Big 10 is very top heavy. I will agree with that as well. But it's not because that Big 12 bottom tier teams are so good. It's because top tier Big 12 teams are way
Are
worse than
not
top
that much
tier.
better. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not that much
Yeah.
better.
But we clearly missed out on 3 SEC teams making this playoff really good solely because they beat up on each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
that's
Ole Miss and Alabama both beat South Carolina. Alabama lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and Florida. It's like those 3 teams right there should be in over Boise State, Arizona State, Indiana. I mean, at this rate, SMU, probably Clemson. Like they're all just beating up on each other, and it's hurting the SEC's and college football's chance of seeing the actual best 12 teams in there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
yeah, I mean like
Yep.
I do agree blowouts will always be common because they're always going to happen. Like, I mean,
I
because
don't think I don't think if you have the best 12 football teams in there, you probably see less blowouts.
I
But
mean,
if
yeah,
you have
but
the 12 most deserving, you're going to see some blowouts because you
who?
might be deserving, but you're not a top 12 football team.
I mean, so say who would be the fifth? Who's the fifth best team in your eyes in the country? Probably like what Ole Miss maybe to you.
Yeah, I mean, probably to me, it would probably be, you know, Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, however you want to rank that, then probably Texas, and then
Penn State.
potentially Notre Dame, and then I would probably say Alabama,
Yeah.
Ole Miss, South Carolina, then a Penn State.
So say the 6 versus 11 seed. You got Ole Miss, but then they play they play Miami. I think Ole Miss might blow out Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Who's the sixth seed in the playoff this year? Who was it?
Penn State.
Penn State.
Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina probably beat Penn State.
That's where I disagree.
How?
Because
How?
Penn State has looked good. They
Against who?
Oregon,
They
the,
lost.
the number 1 seed,
They lost.
SMU.
They gave up 40 points to Oregon.
They scored 37 on Oregon.
Oregon's defense isn't that great.
Like, I mean, we're gonna
That's a
argue.
70-point football game. You think Penn State would go in there and put up 30 against Ole Miss defense or Alabama defense? You think Penn State's
Alabama,
defense could
yes,
stop Milroe, could stop Jackson Dart, could stop these guys? No way in heck.
yes, they could. They just made a like.
Come
Okay,
on, let's be for real.
okay. Whose offense looked the best in the college football playoff so far? Ohio State.
Yeah, probably.
They held them to 20 points. That's a good
Well,
defense.
we also saw Ohio State lose to Michigan.
I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. They
All I'm
held
saying
a
is that wouldn't happen in the if Penn State played Alabama, Ole Miss. See, this is why I wish Nate was here because Nate would agree. I think a lot of people would agree.
Nate would agree with anything that puts Alabama in the playoff.
Yeah, that's why
They
I
should have
just
been.
stay in the middle.
They should have
Like,
been
Penn
because
State.
they're a top 12 football team. They're a top 10 football team.
I don't see the Penn State hate. They just beat a team 38-10.
I'm not hating on Penn State, but there's levels to it. There's levels to Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and then there's levels to Penn State, Indiana, and whoever
Penn State
else.
is not in the same tier as Indiana. I guarantee you, if Alabama
But
is put in
Indiana
that,
had a better record.
if Alabama goes to Happy Valley on a whiteout, Penn State wins that football game.
I mean, that's an everyday Saturday, and in the SEC.
Every
There
day
is something
Whiteout.
different
Saturday.
about a whiteout.
Every day
The-
Saturday.
Ain't nobody scared of no whiteout in the SEC. I promise you
Okay.
that.
Okay. But they're scared of Jordan Hare. Alabama's
Yeah.
scared to go to Jordan Hare,
I'm
but they're
sure
not
people
scared of
don't
a
like playing
whiteout.
in the swamp. I'm sure people don't like playing Texas at Texas. I'm sure people don't want to play at LSU. I'm sure people don't want to play at Oklahoma.
I believe this comment right
SEC
here.
guy sounds like he has SEC bias.
I mean, they're the best. It's the best conference in college football
It is
top
the
to
best
bottom.
conference in college football.
By
Yeah, but
far.
you can't tell me Penn State wouldn't go 9-3 in this conference as well, just like Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina did.
They wouldn't. Maybe 8 wins. Maybe
No.
8-4.
All right. Let's turn the page. Let's preview. And this is we're not gonna go like official picks or anything because the lines are fairly fresh and they're gonna move. So next Monday when we're back, we'll do official
I'll make it
plays.
quick. Texas covers and Penn State covers. Move on.
So what? Okay, hold on. Just in case, we'll start Penn State, Boise State. That's the first one. You got Penn State favored at -10.5, over and under 52.5. Where are we leaning?
I'm actually
38-10.
leaning toward
38.
the under in this one, actually, because I don't think Boise State is going to be able to score a lot.
There is a
This comment right here.
true.
This comment.
They said Oklahoma couldn't either, and that part was true.
I mean, nobody's hating on Oregon or Ohio State or, I mean, maybe some potential hate on SMU because look what happened, but nobody's hating on the top
I
team.
can handle it.
Penn
I can
State's a
handle it.
top team.
I'm just saying, give me SEC 1 through 7 versus any other conference in America. They come out winning. I don't know how you would set that up. They would win every game.
So I've got a feeling this Penn State line might fluctuate a little bit, and I think it's going to go closer to the 2 touchdowns. If it gets to that, I'm going to take Boise to cover because rest advantage and neutral site.
He does love his rest advantage.
Rest advantage and neutral site.
This is the thing that I was texting about earlier about similar to rest advantage. Penn State's still going to have 10 days rest.
That is not the same as 20.
I
Not
know
the
it's
same
not,
as
but
28.
it's a lot though.
Also,
It's a decent amount, but like
Penn
it
State-
adds up, dude.
it's different if Penn State just got out of a game against
That was
Oregon.
grueling. Yeah, that was
they just got
grueling.
out of a game where they blew out SMU.
I'm with
Yeah.
you from that standpoint. That's why the line has to go up before I even think about a cover.
Yeah.
But at 10.5, to me, it's easy. Penn State is it easy. But if it goes up over 2 touchdowns, then you'll see me lean that other way because I think they can
Over
hang
2
around.
touchdowns, I think I just avoid it altogether. If it's
That's what-
13 and a half, I'd still take Penn State.
I
But
think I take the
14
cover
and a
at
half,
14. Nah, I don't know if I touch that.
I don't touch 14 and a half. I touch 14 because there's push potential. I mean, I still think Penn State covers that 14 and a half, but there can be there's other value to be found in that game.
I'll put it this way. If it goes to 14, it will make me do research. If it's at 10, I do no research and I take the Penn State cover. If it goes to 14, I do research.
20 days can cause you to be rusty.
It can. Different teams respond differently. Different teams respond to a regular bye week differently. Like
I
there's
think
some teams that handle a regular bye week poorly.
With Boise, the one thing is Ashton Genty won't be rusty.
You're gonna get a healthy
he
Ashton
just
Genty.
he needed a rest because he got 400 carries.
Take a look at what Genty did week 1.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one to see Genty actually go against a physical defense.
Yeah, and hopefully he'll prove his first round merit because everyone has him
Penn
being
State
in like a
defense
top
wasn't
15
physical.
pick.
Could be a really really bad look for Genty if he only gets like 70
yards.
on like
Oh my
25
God,
carries.
are you in my head? That's 70. All right, so
I
we go to the
mean,
next
I'm
one.
saying-
Texas,
I'm
Arizona
saying
State.
physical compared to what Boise State's played all year. There's
Yeah.
levels to this.
Which is not.
Yeah.
All right. So Texas, Arizona State. Texas favored by 14. Over unders at 51.5. What are your initial leans on this one?
I've never
Texas
wanted to
cover.
choose the cover 14 more in my life. I might buy it up to 21. And this is another one where Scatabo was just on the press conference talking about he should be the Heisman, this and that. Well, here you go, buddy. Here's a bunch of 6'5", 300-pounders that run a 4.2
Yeah, it's
coming
not
at
gonna
you.
be fun to
The
run.
one thing
It's
that
not
does
gonna be fun
worry
to
me
run.
is because, like, obviously Clemson would have covered anything over 14 and a half, but it was mainly a backdoor cover. Hopefully Texas wouldn't do that again. Basically, like, go up 31-7 and take their foot off the gas. They kind of realized what they kind of did because all of a sudden it was a one possession game. So I don't think they'd do it again. But
Uh,
that'd be
I,
the only thing.
I think if Texas goes up by a lot and puts all the backups in, they still cover with the backups in.
'Cause I was gonna say, Texas might be a little banged up on the line after that game. I think they got a
They
couple
are.
guys that got nicked up, which I think I don't know. I
You get 10 days rest. So
Yeah,
Yep.
you just don't know how serious it was.
yeah.
If they're just banged up, they'll probably be good to go. This
And
is
they'll get
one.
Isaiah Bond back too, which helps a lot.
This is the one where I will do research because the line is at 2 touchdowns. Like that's like my like if it gets to 2 touchdowns, I'll at least do research because 2 touchdowns is a lot for a top 12 team, in the college football playoff. Neutral site stakes are high, rest advantage for Arizona, all those things that I mentioned. Like
I-
it is enough to make me do research if the line is high enough. But
I'll look at
anything
the
that's a
Texas.
single digit, I'll definitely look. If it's
I'll look at
14, I will look.
team totals as well because I mean, like, Arizona State will not stop Texas. It's
They
the
can't
one.
do it.
It's the one thing with Texas goes up big and takes their foot off the gas on the defensive side of the football,
Yep,
and then that
agreed.
allows Scatabo to get a little rowdy.
The line's a little higher for the over under. If that was like anywhere like 46, 47, I probably would have just gone straight over with that.
Yeah.
But they put it a little over 50.
The
Anywhere
line being at
not in the 50s, I
52,
take it.
I think the line being at 52 and the spread being at 14 means they think Texas is going to score a
Yep,
lot of
that's
points.
exactly what they
Yeah, I'm
think.
curious.
They think they're
Let
going
me.
to drop
I'll
40 on
look
them.
up. I'll look up the Texas team total to see what it is. Because I'm very curious to what that is because I think like with the high over under and the spread, like what's that? I think
You're
it's
going
gonna
to look at like,
be
it's like
38-20
34,
or it's like
38. Yeah,
30
38.
34-20 or no, it'd be like a 33-21 game,
Yeah,
something like that.
their over under is going to be like in the low 30s.
Yeah. Which I don't mind that at all because I mean I think Clemson's defense is probably better, if not at least on par of Arizona State's, and they just dropped 38 on them. So
Arizona State's run defense is a little bit better.
I still don't think it's gonna matter because I mean Texas
Probably
is
not.
just so much bigger.
Yeah. All right.
Texas team
Well,
total is 32 and a half. It's high, but I
What's
yeah,
still like it.
I
You have
like
it
it.
pulled up?
Mhm.
You have it pulled up?
Yeah.
What's the halftime line?
Halftime, 16 and a
Halftime.
half. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
You get 17 in the first half. They had what 28 in the first half against Clemson.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And I mean
Yeah,
that's
I like that.
probably smarter because like you're saying, if they go up big,
They
take their
take their
foot
foot
off the
off.
gas a little bit. Because
Yeah.
they're not going to do that first half. Don't
Mm-mm.
matter what the score
Oh,
is.
they
they're
got
gonna
to
be
make a
there.
statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. First half looks, especially in these first two games, I think both of these first half looks are pretty good. You don't know what happens if it gets out of hand,
I
which
might take
is
that right now.
somewhat likely.
Yeah.
Let's move to Ohio State and Oregon. I've loved seeing this. Ohio State favored by 2.5. Over
Wow.
unders at 54.5. What do you guys think?
I mean, value is Oregon money line. I mean, apparently, they're supposed to be the best team in the country, and they got plus money on the money line. So I mean, if you're making like a better's pick right here, might as well take that. But the smart pick that I think is going to hit and I want to take is the Ohio State cover -2.5.
If Ohio State has the best skill guys in all of college football. I
Right.
don't think anyone has better skill guys. Depth at receiver, depth at running back, solid quarterback. I just think
I would say
if they
Oregon's
come out,
close.
Yes, but the 1-2 punch for the wide receivers,
No, yeah,
the
or
1-2 punch of
Ohio State
running
too,
back,
for
man, the
sure. But
1-2 punch of running back is I don't know if that can be topped.
I think Oregon's
Um,
running back is a little underrated, and the one thing that helps Oregon is I trust Dylan Gabriel a hell of a lot more than I do Will Howard.
100%, 100%. He's a difference maker.
What I also looked at is in this game, Oregon and Ohio State's team total is both at 26.5. Now the values are different, but they're both at 26.5.
I think, going back to all of the stuff I heard about, having to beat a team twice in one season with Georgia, Texas, I think this is, and I was on the side of, well, I mean, Georgia's still a better football team, so it's going to be tougher for Texas. I think this leans way more to Ohio State's favor, seeing on exactly how they lost the football game when they played Oregon earlier in the year, just knowing that they
They
could have
they
won.
they
And
want to
then,
get back too. Like
yeah,
they want
I
to get
think
back game here.
and just based on Ohio State's attitude and how they go about it, I think, especially after what happened to Michigan to them, and then you look at this previous game where before the game they're chirping at Tennessee guys going back into the locker room. I think they got a lot coming for Oregon. I really do.
If Ohio State comes out like they did against Tennessee, if they look like that same team,
They beat anyone in the they beat
they,
anyone in the country
they might win
like that.
by more than a touchdown. Like they might win by 10.
Yeah,
I mean, I think my early lean right now is I said it when they last played. Good offense always beats good defense in college football.
Yep.
My early lean is the over because
I
I
like
took it in
the
the last
over
game.
as well.
I took it in the last game.
I did too.
So
I like the over. Um, I actually thought that they would put it closer to 60. So I like the fact that they left it under
55 seems
55.
low.
Yep.
When the
is
last game
is
was
Ohio
33.
State is Ohio State money line less than -200?
No, it's minus
Once that
130.
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
it's one.
I would say either money line if you're wanting a value or like a parlay. I think it'd be smart to add Oregon money line in there, but I think Ohio State's winning this football game. They have
It's
this
going to
is
be such a good game.
I think this is a situation where Oregon might not be rusty, but Ohio State has massive momentum advantage as far as just a
It's
team.
momentum.
Yeah,
Like that's where you get into like rest advantage versus momentum. Like
right. Just
the way
kind of
that they
I
came
mean,
out against a team that is of a similar caliber and just dismantled them. Like
yeah.
that's serious momentum for the next game. Like that's like you're riding high. Like that's a hot
Yeah.
streak waiting to happen.
And I think,
I
like Nate says all the time, where whenever Alabama loses, he's always like, "Well, this is the best thing that could ever happen for him." That kind of spiel. I kind of do believe it in this Ohio State sense after losing to Michigan, because it's like
True.
kind of
True.
transcended them. I think to being like,
Yep.
I mean, we're the clear better team, but we got to
So
show it. You
valid.
know what I mean?
That's
also
valid.
too someone said in the chat, it's not just popping up so I can't put it on the screen for some reason, but Oregon does have an advantage at head coach. We saw it in the last game they played. What was it? The intentional 12 men on the field, something like that.
Yep.
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 So I mean, Oregon,
To get the runoff.
they have the head coach advantage. I will definitely say that. But
And a
it's
lot of days to plan. A lot of days to plan.
it's different when a team like it seems like Ohio State's playing bad, which is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last one. Let's go to Notre Dame and Georgia. Georgia favored by 1.5. Last time I looked, I've been watching it fluctuate a little bit though.
Ohio
So I don't
State
know if you
or
guys see
Notre
anything
Dame
different.
opened up as favored. It switched.
That's what I. That's yeah. It's I looked at
Yep.
12 o'clock this afternoon and I saw Georgia favored by 1.5.
It's
Over
still
unders at
1.5.
44.5.
That's low,
I
but it's
mean,
also understandable.
after watching Notre Dame's offense against Indiana and knowing that Georgia's definitely going to come out there with a good defensive plan,
Yep.
I mean, the under is kind of tempting, but 44 is very low because I could see this getting into somewhat of a shootout somehow. But historically, I believe Georgia versus Notre Dame has also been pretty low scoring because I don't want to talk about it this week yet because we're going to talk about this on next week. But you got, well, I think it's a good quarterback, but inexperienced quarterback for Georgia. and you got a really, really good defense for Georgia going against, I would think, subpar, maybe right at average offense for Notre Dame. So I think it's two really, really good defensive football teams going against each other, which tends to lean towards the under. But I'm going to
Riley
take
Leonard is a difference maker. That's the one thing that worries me for Georgia. They have had trouble with mobile quarterbacks in the past. But obviously, Riley Leonard's not Jalen Milroe.
yeah.
So, but they have had
You
trouble
can't
with
sleep
mobile
on the run
quarterbacks.
game either. Notre
I
Dame's
mean,
run game is
their run
is
game's solid,
solid.
but no one's been able to lean on Georgia ever really. So that's my main thing. I think they I believe in Gunner, but not to the extent of Brandon. I don't think. I think he's a solid, like, he'll be a game manager. He might not lose the game for you. He might make a couple mistakes that cause their defense to have a little more stress than they want. But if anyone's defense can handle that stress, it's Georgia's. But
Yeah.
the
Hey, don't
over under is
forget,
perfect number.
Gunnar Stockton is actually third in Georgia high school passing yards. So
It's just completely different when you haven't played in an organized football game, like meaningful
and
organized football game, in 2.5 years probably, and now has to go. He played
but
Texas, and
like
then
Cam said, 20 something days to prepare.
you like he also said earlier, you can only prepare so much until you see it.
Well, you got to go against Georgia's
Gotta
defense in
experience it.
practice.
It's different when you're in an environment, not like seeing Georgia defense on a practice field.
But
Neutral environment,
we're
though.
talking
Neutral
we're talking
environment.
about the guy that played the second half of the SEC championship football game
And had
Yeah.
to bring his team back.
and had to
They
win the
were
game.
losing that game. They were
I-
losing
I-
that
I-
game.
I
He
agree
didn't have
with
to hold
you.
on to a lead.
I
He was
agree
losing.
with Will. He's not, the Heisman winner, but he's shown this year already that he can make plays. He can be a guy.
I'm also growing increasingly tired of people saying Gunner brought you guys back. It was a fucking 3-point deficit. Stop it. Stop it.
But it was against one of the best defensives in college football.
Pretty highly touted defense.
Yes. But he also, let's not act like it was Gunner bringing you guys back. The whole offense was you guys were finally able to run the ball. And then the one time you guys asked him to throw the ball, he threw it directly to a DB, just where no one was.
I mean, hey,
I believe in Gunner. I believe in Gunner.
you just proved my point a little bit. Georgia money line. It was the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
offense.
It was everyone banded together to get that.
I mean,
done.
yeah,
You can't tell me in that game the offense didn't look like it had a little bit more.
Oh no, it was another level.
Little go.
They turned it up a notch.
I'm not saying that Georgia's going to lose this game. I'm just saying that we're giving Gunner hype for bringing someone back, bringing a team back from a deficit, and they're saying it's a 3-point deficit. It's not like he brought you guys back from 20 points.
We know you're a
They were
Florida fan.
losing.
We know you don't want to give any credit where credit's due when it comes to Georgia, but he played his butt off.
Am I not the guy who
almost
says
died.
Am I
He
not
almost
the
died
guy
on the
am
field.
Am I not the guy that says the 21 Georgia defense is probably the greatest of all time? Giving Georgia
Well, that's
credit
just a
all the time
fact.
on this podcast.
That's just a
Yeah,
fact.
that's not even.
You can't deny that.
I legitimately gave Georgia credit in the Texas game, the SEC championship. I was like, I do think Georgia wins this game, but I think Texas leads at halftime because Georgia's not a first half team. And I was correct, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's just a
happened.
smart betting tactic.
Yeah, that's a good job. You did your research.
Yeah. That's not really giving Georgia credit. You're saying they weren't going to win.
You just did research.
I'm about to leave the call. Saying I don't give Georgia credit, man. Brandon don't give no one credit from the Big Ten. They could win.
I do. I think Ohio State and Oregon are really good football teams. I think
just doesn't like Penn
State's a good
State.
football team.
Penn State goes out and beats Boise 55-10. You give them credit?
No,
Oh
It's
my!
Boise State.
that's a high school football team.
55-10.
It's a JV game.
55-10 when Oregon beat them 37-34.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, bad game by Oregon.
Any other chats before we move on? Any other chats?
They said UGA can't win a natty without Beck. I
That's
mean,
not true.
I don't think it's true.
We
Do
almost
I
played
think they'll
better
win the
without him.
national championship? No, but
That's not true. If we know one thing, it's going to be the defense that wins them a championship.
Yeah,
it's the defense
and the
and Kirby.
coaching. It's going to be the
Yeah.
coaching. Yeah, it's Kirby.
Yep.
We win because of Kirby.
And we got the defense and we got Kirby. So
Those didn't change.
we have a chance.
All right, last thing we're going to do, we've got 5 bowl games that we're going to cover. We've got plays for each of these 5. I need to write them down. Oh, and Nate texted me his, so I've got his as well.
I can start if you want. I got them
So
all
I'm gonna
written down.
make
If you want
sure.
me to just go ahead and go.
So first game, let's just do one game at a time, so that way I can write them all side by side, if you guys
All
don't
right.
mind.
Speaking of Nate, Alabama, Michigan. Alabama, 12-point favorite. Over under is 43.5. I, for one, am leaning towards the over because I think this Alabama team has a little bit of animosity and they think they deserve to be in the playoff. Milrose playing, all the guys are playing. And this is a Michigan team that has zero offense at all. I know that's scary for the over, but I think Alabama's going to score and score a lot.
As the Big Ten guy, Alabama cover.
Yeah, that's a smart one as well.
Nate.
Nate's probably got. He's probably buying up the cover to 20.
Nate has Bama over 27.5.
What a cop out, Nate. What are we doing?
Yeah,
Pick a
can't
winner.
even. I'm leaning. This is my issue.
I don't want to
How
hear
does
it.
That's
How
true.
does Michigan? How does
I don't wanna
Michigan
hear it.
score?
Third best
He
running
did.
back on the
He
team.
did though.
Third best running back on the team.
That's
How,
good.
he
That's
can hit
depth.
home runs though. He's the home run hitter. Yeah. So how does Michigan score?
They
That's
don't.
like my. So
They
like
don't.
they played Indiana,
pick
Oregon,
6?
Illinois. Like these are all the top 25 teams they face. Indiana, Oregon, Illinois, Texas, Ohio State. 15, 17, 7, 12, 13.
Look,
That's the amount of points they scored.
We just gotta hope somehow they get garbage time touchdown and make it like 14. But Alabama's gonna have like 40 alone, so that's a cover. That's a cover for the over.
They only scored on Ohio State on short fields. That's basically what Alabama has to not do. Give them a short field.
Yeah.
And Milroe after rest has historically been
Been the
tough
guy.
to deal with, and
And
he hasn't
depending
made that
on
many mistakes.
Depending on if he's going to the draft, transferring, kind of, boost his stock a little bit.
I am also going to take the Bama cover. Bama minus, what is it? Minus
12.
12. Bama minus 12. You guys all had the 12 minus 12?
Yeah, I'll take that for my podcast pick.
Okay.
And I think Alabama's weapons will be too much for Michigan's depleted secondary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just not a good matchup for Michigan. I just don't see how they put points on the board. I can't see it. Which one you want to do next, Brandon?
Let's go with Colorado versus BYU. Colorado is a 4-point favorite. The over-under is 54.5. This is another one where, like Will was saying, might be an opportunity for some guys to boost their draft stock.
Yep.
Shador's playing. I haven't heard 100%. I'm 90% sure Travis Hunter's
is playing.
Yeah. So I think I would buy it down, maybe Colorado -3. I think they're going to come out with a lot more intent to really win this football game than BYU. I don't know why I think BYU is kind of just over with the season because they were in line to be in the Big 12 championship for a long time. They lost some games late. Now they're stuck in this bowl game against Colorado, who I think if they were to play in the regular season, Colorado would have won anyway. So I'm going to go with -3.
What I had, I think Colorado will cover the 4, but I don't like the value with it. So I went somewhere else. I found value in a different thing. I'm going to take Colorado over 28.5 points. I think they can easily do that, especially with all their starters playing. Like BYU's defense is good. How motivated will they be?
Right.
And I think with Shador and Travis and everyone there, they're gonna want to go out with Colorado with a bang because they're leaving Dion. They gotta go out on top.
True.
Um, Nate has over 54.5.
Fair.
BYU has a pass defense that might be able to neutralize Colorado a little bit to a degree. I don't think they're going to shut them out by any stretch of the imagination. The key for BYU is they have to hold Colorado to less than 30 points. If they can hold them to under 30, it's going to be a one-score game, in which case I would take the BYU cover. Because Colorado's defense, while they have been playing better, the games that they have lost all were against teams that held them to under 30. They held it to under 30, they lost the game, which means Colorado generally gives up somewhere around 30 points. So the line will be right around there. I think because I don't see a blowout, and I see a world where BYU has a chance to be in this game and perhaps win this game. There's just so many variables that aren't accounted for. Like, what's motivation level? What's motivation level for the guys that are about to get drafted in the first round? Like, what's motivation level for BYU who got
Get
snubbed
drafted at
out of?
1-1.
Yeah.
Sure, but isn't that already solidified if you're, you know, a certain guy? Like, isn't that
I mean,
you
yeah,
already
like
kind
I
of
like
know?
yeah.
I think it leans more so on Will's thought of it's for Dion more so. Like this is
Sure.
their final game in Boulder, or not in Boulder, but for Colorado.
Shador does happen to be the coach's son.
Kind of, yep, kind of an
So
end of an era kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take BYU to cover this.
I don't mind
Wow.
that. I think the spread is right where it should be. Like
I
4
think
is a death trap.
I
If
think
you're
Colorado wins, but I think it's a close game. There is a world where BYU can win this game. So I'm just gonna take the cover, but low key, I think Colorado wins. So I'm gonna take BYU +4. If it was minus 3, I probably would have played a push and went with Colorado.
That's what I'm
But I
doing.
think I think they might. I think I win if I do this and it works out. So I'm gonna take the cover because I got to be different. I can't just be the same as y'all. I
he
was trying
does
to figure.
happen to be Dion's son. I
Uh,
was shocked too as well when I
yeah,
found
it's
that out.
wild. I was trying to find a world where Michigan could cover against Bama, and I was searching, and I was just like,
Nah.
I got nothing. But this one, I have something where it's like, okay, there's a world where this can happen.
It's the only reason Shador
Um,
plays is because he's his son.
yeah. Otherwise, he's sitting this thing out. 3 games left. Which one next, Brandon?
Let's go with Miami versus Iowa State. Miami's a 3.5 point favorite. The
Okay.
over under is 55.5.
Okay.
Don't know what I'm gonna take in this one yet. I need you guys to ramble out some thoughts.
All
I can
right.
go.
Well, I'll start with Nate, and then will you go?
All right.
Nate is taking Iowa State +3.5.
That's
Interesting.
got to be strictly because like there was so much talk about Miami getting in over Alabama. I think there's some
Some
small hate
animosity.
for
Yeah.
There's a
Miami.
little bit
Yeah,
of bias there. Yeah, there's a little
yeah.
bit of bias.
He wants to
See,
see Miami's downfall.
could potentially be the last one of the year. So I'm, fireworks. 2 words. Over
Yeah.
55 and a
I
half.
thought the line was low, honestly.
Yeah,
I thought the line was
I thought it
low.
was going to be in the 60s. Cam Ward
Yeah.
is playing. Made sure of
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yep.
I think everyone on Iowa State's going to play as well. So I'm going to take the over 55 and a half. 2 good offenses and 2 bad defenses.
I just
Yep.
forgot that I watched this Iowa State team get absolutely dismantled by Arizona State
Yeah, it was
in
bad.
the Big 12 championship. So I am actually going to take Miami -3.5.
All right. -3.5. So this game's in Florida, in case you guys didn't know. So
Home
I
game.
would say Miami probably travels well, if nothing else.
They don't travel to their own stadium well though.
I don't know. They're going to travel better than Iowa State is to this game. I
True.
feel like that's not debatable.
Yeah.
There might be 0 Iowa State fans
Yeah,
there
that's
out of the
um.
3,000 that are there.
So Iowa State, the best offenses they have faced, Arizona State and Kansas. Sleep on Kansas. They actually have a good offense.
They
Both of
do.
those teams scored 45 points against them.
Yep.
Miami will be the best offense that Iowa State plays. 30 The team total is only 29.5. I'm taking Miami over 29.5 points.
That's low.
It's at minus
Is
115 too.
is Restrepo playing?
Don't know. Don't care. Because they're going to run the ball too. Martinez is playing.
Okay. I think the over's fine because I mean, give me.
They got Arroyo too. Elijah Arroyo is going to play. Like their guys for the most part are going to be there and healthy.
I think Iowa State's defense is their offense is good enough to score on Miami's defense as well. Rocco
Oh,
Becht is no
every offense,
slouch.
every offense is. Every
Rocco
offense
Becht
is.
is no slouch. I think he's actually a solid quarterback. It's just he was kind of running for his life in the
No, I
Arizona
love the
State game.
over.
Yeah.
I love the over. I think it's a great play. Two more. What's next?
Let's go with Georgia Tech versus Vanderbilt. Georgia
All right,
Tech,
let me do.
2.5 point favorite, over unders 51.5. This one to me
Nate,
is wild. I have no idea what to take here.
this one was tough for me. I'll be honest. Nate is taking over 51.5.
See,
Interesting.
I could see every angle I try to look at this game, I could see happening, which is a bad thing because,
It's a
like,
high variance game, as
yeah,
Bud Elliott would say.
I
It's a
could
high
see
variance
over
game.
51.5, but they run the ball probably a lot. I could see under 51.5 for that reason. I could see Georgia Tech winning by 7, but I could also see Vandy winning by like 10. So I don't know. What's halftime lines look like, Will? Do you have that up?
Yeah, I'll grab it while I'm saying my play. My play. Looked into it. Obviously, we know Georgia Tech's probably besides Haynes King, their biggest weapon is gone. Um, Mr. Singleton.
He's their
Uh,
second biggest weapon. Jamal Haynes is their third biggest weapon. Jamal Haynes is their second biggest weapon. What they
True.
do with the run game
Yeah,
isn't
yeah, yeah.
replicated on any other levels.
No.
I think, and they're missing their left tackle as well. I
That is
still think
vital.
I still think Georgia Tech can win this game. So I'm going to take Vanderbilt with the points plus 2.5.
Vanderbilt plus 2.5.
I actually changed to plus 3 if we want to do that.
Do it.
Yeah,
Allowed.
I'll take plus 3. It's at minus 115 value. What first half lines are you looking for, Brandon?
Actually, I've changed my mind.
Okay.
I like the coach at Georgia Tech. He's a dude.
Love that guy.
I think the players are gonna play their hearts out for that man. Give me Georgia Tech minus 2.5.
I am
highly
also.
considered Vandy money line. Highly considered it.
I think the value is great. I think the
Mhm.
value is great. I think this is a game either team can win. Um,
Is it? Are we sure?
Couple things for me.
Are we sure this
I
is
think.
Pavia's last year?
I think. I think
thought
they
he
No,
won
denied
a
he,
lawsuit.
his request for eligibility.
I
Yeah,
thought they.
he won that lawsuit, which I think gave him 2 more years.
No, I thought he got an extra year. So I think he's coming back,
Yeah.
but he might not want to. I don't know.
Haynes King is also coming back, so that's a wash.
True.
Yeah.
When Brent Key, the coach for Georgia Tech, has time to prepare, or when it is a big game, he does his best work. Like this is when these are the things he shows up for. They're coming off like a heartbreaking loss against Georgia, so they have been dying to play again. Outside of Singleton and the left tackle, they did pretty good in the portal. Most of their guys are going to play. It's just those two key pieces that they're going to be missing. And then if Haynes King is on the field, I believe that I don't know what he's just got like these intangibles. Like I don't know if he's going to be a great quarterback for the foreseeable future, but he just has this fight in him. I always think they have a chance.
He's a taller, skinnier Diego Pavia.
Similar to
Yeah.
Gunnar Stockton with the amount of heart he's got, you know?
Yep. And they play for him. Like they play behind him.
Exactly.
I'm going to take Georgia Tech minus 2.5. I'm going to take it. Maybe
I love
ACC
it.
bias. I honestly like this game could literally go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised.
It's a close
I'm
game,
SEC
regardless.
biased, and I'm still taking Georgia Tech minus 2.5.
I
That's the
think this
amount
is
of
the type of
respect.
game. It's the type of game they play well in. This is
Yeah.
the type of game they do well in.
That's the amount of respect I have for Haynes King.
All right, last one. What is it?
Last one is South Carolina versus Illinois. South Carolina
Okay.
minus 9.5 point favorites. Over unders 48.5.
Disrespectful.
Disrespectful, but as Shane Beamer did say, Lenore Sellers might be the best player in college football.
Facts.
Which I don't know about that, but he could be top 5 potentially.
Maybe next year.
Um,
I think definitely next year. I don't think maybe. I think definitely.
I think I'm gonna ride out the minus 9.5 simply because Illinois physicality level is not going to be up to South Carolina standards. I mean, South Carolina's defense is very, very good, very physical, very fast. And I don't think there's anything Illinois has ever seen that's comparable to Sellers with his running ability and the things that he does, just changing the game. So I think I'm going to ride out the 9.5. I think this is a big statement game, kind of for South Carolina, kind of something they can build on moving into next year because they've already built a lot in 2024 here. So I think this will be something that Beamer boys get up for and want to roll into next year and hopefully find themselves in a top 12 situation next year.
Yeah.
So
Will. I'll go with Nate. Nate over 48.5.
Nate taking
Illinois is a
single
solid
spread.
team.
Did he just
Probably
take
not.
only over unders?
He took Iowa State to cover, and everything else was an over under.
Illinois is a solid football team. Am I taking them to cover? No, not one bit. Um, but I think they're a little sneaky. That people forget that they took, Penn State a little bit to the wire. Um, do I think that they cover? No, but I also had over 48.5 because I think I think Illinois can score 14 to 17 to 21 in that range. And if you give me 21 points from Illinois, I take I think South Carolina is going to score 30 plus. So it's an easy over for me.
So Illinois has played two teams of like a similar caliber to South Carolina. They lost both of those by double digits.
Who were those?
But uh,
No.
there's Oregon and
Penn State they lost 21 to 7 to Penn State, but
yeah,
it was like 14-7 with like few minutes to go, and then Penn State scored a late touchdown.
yep. They were both true road games though, hostile environments. So I take that into consideration. One was only a 14-point loss. I think South Carolina wins this game. I think the neutral site is going to neutralize them a little bit. I think 9.5 is just a tad too steep. Like it's like
Touchdown
right
and a
there.
field goal. Touchdown
It's
and
like
field
right
goal.
there on the border. I think it's like my heart wants to say that South Carolina just blows the doors off them, but I actually think Illinois makes this somewhat competitive. Whether it results in a cover or a 14-point loss will be the thing that they decide on. I'm going to take the cover at plus 10 for Illinois. I'm going to take it at plus 10.
That's why I stayed away from it. I think Illinois is sneaky.
I think the line's like borderline perfect. But I think Illinois can make a game out of this and lose by a touchdown. They're not going to win the game, but I think they can lose by a touchdown. But so that's pretty much all we had. So before we go, Brandon, tell the people what they need to be doing if they haven't done so already.
Yep. Make sure you guys hit the bell first of all on Twitch so it sends you notifications. We are still working on getting some newer equipment, stuff like that. So feel free to hit the donation, the subscription, all that stuff. That helps us out so we can get some newer technology so that we can give you guys like a countdown screen or something like that before we go live. I know it's tough. So if you haven't already, hit the bell so you guys, it sends you a notification when we do go live so you don't miss anything, you don't miss any picks. And I think today, what did we give out? 10 free picks almost. I know we're doing a lot more on Monday next week, but I don't think you're going to find that amount of picks for free anywhere. I know me and Will used to scour Twitter
Yeah.
for free picks for
Oh, yeah.
hours on end.
It might not
Um,
always stay that way too, so
yeah.
enjoy it while you can.
No, it'll stay that way.
I'm trying
Well,
to, increase the sense of urgency.
yeah, make sure you guys subscribe. It helps us out. Whatever you guys listen on, follow us, all that good stuff. Make sure follow the Twitter. We got a Twitter now, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, all of it. We're on all of it. So we appreciate you guys. We hope you guys all have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. And we will see you guys next week. But thank you guys for listening to the episode.
Yep. Me and Will are going to be back on Friday for NFL Week 17. The rest of us will be back next Monday. All four of us should be back for next Monday. Official preview of the second round of the college football playoff. Definitely stay tuned for that. We'll have our picks and predictions for that, of course. Other than that, we will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
Peace.